thanks all for coming. It's great to be here. And thanks, Bloomreach, for arranging this and inviting me. So as was said pretty clearly, I'm a database guy. Okay, now that's not a conversation opener. Usually it's a way to finish a conversation. Okay, I use this on airplanes. If the person next to me is starting to be a little too talkative, I'll say I'm a database guy, and then I'm free for the whole flight. Closer? Okay. And it's definitely not a great pickup line in a bar either. But things are changing. Okay, so database people today are getting more respect than ever. So in particular, if you look at the web or search engines on the web, all of a sudden structured data has become a first-class citizen. So you do a search, for example, on Stanford University, and here on the right-hand side, you're seeing something that came out of a database. Okay, we call it the Google Knowledge Graph. It's a fancy database. Okay, and you can go even further. You can say, movies by Woody Allen, and it even recognizes that you're talking about a set of objects. Okay, so it gives you along the top, it gives you a few movies by Woody Allen. So what can be cooler than that? We're coming up in search results on the top, on the right, everywhere. Okay, we have come. Okay, we have arrived. But this is just part of the story. If you look on the web, there is actually a ton of structured data. Okay, and the reason that you're only seeing it now is because folks like me have been too slow doing their work, not being very efficient, maybe drinking too much coffee, and or spending too much time writing coffee books, and haven't really done their work. So the web is full of data about any hobby that you might think about, any public data, government data, any kinds of statistics, hobby, stuff like that. And what we've done for the most part in the last, say, 15 years is we've taken this data and we've sort of been reactive. We're trying to mine it. We're trying to find the good data out of the bad data. We're trying to find when it's relevant to queries. We haven't solved that problem by any stretch of the imagination, but what I'm calling that is being reactive to the data that is there. Okay? But in the last few years, the web has become a platform that encourages people to publish more data. So as I'm sure you know, there's a lot of data that is sitting locked up in silos, and I can go on and on and on and make you all weep, right? And but now people are expecting that data be made public, right? So if you look at citizens, activism or whatever the buzzword of the day is, people are expecting all this data to be on the web. And so you're expecting crime data from your county, you're expecting government data from national, local, and state governments. You're expecting to know what are the conditions, what are the water conditions in various places in the world. So we're being very proactive. We're creating a set of tools that enables people to publish this data much more easily. And by publish, I don't mean put up a PDF file somewhere on the web. That is an insult to the collective intelligence of database people, right? Or any people. Okay, but more than that, so that's being proactive. We're encouraging people to put data up, but we're also thinking about new data management applications. So, for example, there's no reason why I cannot collect a database of the price of a bottle of water anywhere in the world, say in 24 hours. I should be able to crowdsource this. People will walk into their local grocery store, look at the bottle, or, in the worst case, and just click in the price of the bottle of water, and we will know what's the price of water in various places. Now, I didn't make up this example. Okay, this example came to me from an award-winning water expert. I don't know why I hang out with water experts a lot. Maybe that's how I got into coffee. But so you can actually imagine today crowdsourcing, getting new databases that were not imaginable a few years ago. Okay, and in some industry, this makes a huge difference. For example, in the water industry, the decisions that they're making about where to invest in new water projects is based on data that is between 3 and 5 years old. Can you imagine if Google gave you results from a crawl from 5 years ago? It would be amusing, but it would be kind of useless, right? So we're thinking about 100 milliseconds of response times, and these guys are dealing with data from 5 years ago. And if they can get data that is, from yesterday, in a good case, or even 6 months ago, that can change the entire industry of how, say, people in water or some forms of agriculture work. So we're really have the opportunity here to invent a bright future. Now, obviously, so not only are we getting respect as database people, we have a new buzzword, right? Big data. You can actually go and read about big data in the New York Times or any of your favorite publications. And so the question is, this data on the web that I'm talking about, or I will be talking about, is that big data? And the answer is yes, but it's a different dimension of big data. Okay, it's not big data in the sense that it's a petabyte of rows that look exactly the same with different readings of a GPS or something like that. This is very heterogeneous data. So this is data that is created by millions of people on every topic imaginable. Okay, and with a lot of cultural biases built into this. Okay, so it's big data in terms of its heterogeneity. So you've got the amount of data is not that huge. It'll probably fit on my phone or for sure on a laptop. Okay, but it's created by several orders of magnitude more people than have ever created structured data before. And the more interesting part about it is that several orders of magnitude more people are actually seeing that data and benefiting from that data. Okay, and that's what's really exciting. You've got millions, hundreds of millions. Okay, make up your favorite number. People that are actually looking at this data and gaining benefit from it every day. And I'm going to show you examples of that. Okay, so for those of you who are sort of a little bit outside the database community, we come in 3 flavors. Okay, and you can also get the swirl version where you get a little bit of each. So we like to pride ourselves as database people as plumbers. Okay, we're the people underneath, making sure that your data is stored, large amounts of data. You can, your system can crash, and then you'll turn on the switch again, and all your data will come back and will be consistent and durability and all that great stuff, and will execute your complicated queries really, really fast. Okay. We are the plumbers. We don't care what goes on underneath, as long as, leave us alone. We'll just give you a good system. Then we are, some of us are more, not some of the community are more designers. We like to be very elegant about stuff. We like to design schemas to make sure that your data is stored. The tables that you have make sense. We invent nice query languages so you can write these very complicated requests for information in 3 lines that, you won't understand 2 weeks from now. But those are, so we're, designers of information spaces. But now, there's a new breed of us, which is the one that is at least exciting to me, which is the data enthusiasts. We actually care about the data. Okay, we go out there, we're passionate about data, we collect the data, we schmooze it, we schnoozle it, we do whatever we need to do to it in order to make it interesting to people like us or people that we think we're going to make happy. Okay, so this is a different breed of database people, but I should emphasize that the plumbers have plenty of work in this new world as well. Okay, so the plumbers are especially the good ones, have plenty of new challenges. So what do we want to do with all this data on the web? Okay, wouldn't it be nice if everybody would just choose a database, put all this data in, and under a really nice schema that would be designed by a committee of representatives from 72 countries, and everything would be good and dandy. But that's not going to happen. Okay, so what you need really is an ecosystem. You need, just like the web itself is an ecosystem of people publishing data, search engines indexing it and showing it, and people commenting it, and giving weight to different pages depending on how much they look at them or whatever. You need to develop the same thing for structured data. Okay, so at the top of the ecosystem, you need 2 things. One is discovering good structured data. Okay, or discovering, creating, and importing from existing data sets. Once you bring the data in, you need to be able to do, every verb that has ever been invented by mankind is applicable to data, right? So cleaning and scrubbing and stuff like that is stuff that we do. So we need to be able to clean the data to make sure that it's consistent with other data sets that we have. We need to be able to query it and share it with other people before we actually, completely clean it up. We need to integrate it. This is my the reason I get up in the morning. We need to integrate data from multiple sources. So real interesting observations come when you start combining data from one place in the world with data from another place in the world that was created by different people, and that's how you get some interesting conclusions. And then you need to be able to visualize it. So for some bizarre reason, the vast majority of the public does not like to look at rows, thousands of rows of data. I don't know why, okay? They like to look at pretty maps and timelines and stuff like that. So you need to make that very easy to do. And then you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to publish. So the fact that you create a visualization doesn't help anybody unless you can very easily put it on the web somewhere so millions of people can see it, okay? So this is the vision, okay? I wish I can say this is done and we're moving on to the next thing, okay? So, but this is what we're striving towards with structured data on the web. So what I'm going to be telling you today is I'll be talking about three things, or actually two things and another thing. The first is, so we've in my team at Google, so I belong to Google Research, which is an organization within Google, and within that I lead the database research team. Okay, now we don't call ourselves database research team because, as I said, that's not a very good pickup line in a bar. We call ourselves structured data. Okay, structured data as opposed to the rest of the company that deals with those web page thingies. Okay, so we're more about structured data. Anything that you would think of putting in a table, in a spreadsheet, in a database. Okay, and there's plenty to keep us busy. So I'm going to be telling you about two things. One is Google Fusion Tables, which is a product that has been around for a little bit at Google, which we use in order to encourage people to publish data. So we make it's essentially a really cool database system that real people can use, and I will prove it to you by pictures. Okay, so it's data management for the 99%. And the second is a project called Web Tables, which is the flip side, which is we go on the web and we look at data that is already there and try to find the good stuff. Okay, and as I'll describe, the good stuff is less than 1% of the total stuff, even when you look at HTML tables. And so finding the good stuff out of the total stuff is actually leads to some very interesting problems. And the third part of the talk, which let's have an agreement here, okay? Slowly put up your hands when you want me to move to this part of the talk, okay? When you've had enough of the technical part. So the third part of the talk, not this early, okay? I need to get through a few of these slides. So the second half of the talk is going to be about coffee, okay? So this is how I became a data enthusiast, okay? And how I have many better pickup lines for bars, or I can recommend them to you at least if you're interested, okay? So I'll talk about how I went to 30 countries on 6 continents to study about the culture of coffee and wrote a book about it. Okay, it's right there. That's the picture. Okay, the infinite emotions of coffee. Okay, so here's one thing I'm not going to talk about. Okay, so 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if I would, and I know this is close to your heart, which is why, or at least to the heart of Bloomreach. Okay. 10 years ago, if I would talk about structured data on the web, you would have asked me about the deep web. You would have come to me and you would say, I read somewhere that the amount of data on the deep web is two orders of magnitude more than all of what Google knows to serve. Okay, otherwise known as the surface web. The deep web is stuff that you fill out a form, and that gets translated into a query that goes to a database and gives you a dynamic HTML page that is the answer to your query. Okay. And that's the deep web, okay? And the problem is that a crawler, a dumb crawler like Google, gets to the form and says, oh, this is a form. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just giving up. And I know that I'm leaving a lot of really good data on the table here, okay? So in fact, that's how I got into Google. Well, I started a company called Transformic. We understood forms. We did all kinds of fancy schmancy stuff with forms. You can read about it in a paper from 2008. The interesting thing about the deep web, which again, I'm not talking about today. This is what I'm not talking about, okay? Is that it's very broad. Okay, so this is an example of a form for tree search in Pennsylvania. You can look for Amish quilts. You can look for parking tickets in India. How can you live without knowing everything about parking tickets in India? Or you can can buy a horse. Okay, so the point is, while a lot of the work on the deep web has focused on very valuable verticals like travel, jobs, finding houses for rent. The work that we were interested in at Google was more about how to cover all this other stuff that is actually very valuable to our users. Okay, as I said, I'm not talking about this, but the work exists. Okay, but by the way, stop me with questions at any time, even about the stuff that I'm not talking about. Okay, so let me talk about fusion tables. Okay, so fusion tables was, we have one of the things we're very proud about in the database community, the academic community and the commercial community, is that we have created the software artifact that is hardest to use by mankind. Okay, so between flying a 747 and tuning an Oracle database, it's not clear which one requires more skill. Okay. Or which one, if it goes wrong, what the consequences will be. Okay, so, and we talk about this. We're very proud. We're proud about it. We're proud of what we built, but we're always self-conscious about the fact that we've built something that nobody can use, or that in order to use it, you have to get paid a lot of money, which is just good. But it's not something we're proud of. So, the idea of fusion tables was to create something that is dead simple, that maybe may not have the full capabilities of any of the database systems that you know and love, but will be useful enough that a broad enough set of people can use and do something useful with. Okay? So the idea is make it easy for people to upload their data, query the data, visualize the data, and publish the data to the world, and share the data. Of course, today you can't do anything without sharing. Okay, so let me give you an example, and you're going to see a lot of coffee in the examples. Okay, so the second part of the talk is sort of trickling into the first part here and there. So here's a table that I found on it was a CSV file that I found on the website of the International Coffee Organization. I uploaded it into fusion tables. This is the coffee consumption per capita by country. So you can see that up north in Scandinavia, people drink a lot of coffee. Okay, and we can explain that later. And I can upload it and share it the same way you share a Google Doc. And the breakthrough in data science, when I do visualize on this table, the thing will recognize that the left column is actually a bunch of countries. If you have a bunch of countries, well, maybe you want to see it on the map. You don't have to tell the database system that. The database system can figure it out by looking at the data and offering you that option. And then, bazam, you get something that is actually very useful. And this is where coffee is produced, not where it's consumed. But you can see immediately that coffee is produced pretty close to the equator, give or take a few thousand miles. Okay, it's not produced in Italy, as most people or many people think. Okay, so this is the thing. I can do this in 2 minutes. I can take the data that I found in a CSV file, which is not very beautiful for most people, and I can create something like this, and I can publish this on my website, and I've done something good for the world. That's just me and my coffee examples, but now what happened, and here's the point. Our most avid users of fusion tables are journalists. Journalists are people who, first of all, they don't have an army of database administrators at their disposal. They're lucky to have a job, right? So they need a tool that they can use very easily. Okay, they get data from very reliable sources, and they're very passionate about their data because they're telling a story about their data. So they need to be able to take that data and visualize it in a way, and then put it on their website as part of their article, because that's where the eyeballs are going to come to. So our journalists, being the most excited users of our tool, have actually taken data sets and made them relevant to millions of people around the world. So to me, that is a proof. Okay, I have a bachelor's in mathematics. That's a proof that fusion tables at least met some of its targets. So this is actually a really interesting data set. I don't know if you remember, about 1.5 years ago, WikiLeaks released the data about all kinds of incidents that happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so this guy from The Guardian in the UK took this data, put it into fusion tables. So the nice thing about the American government, right, is that it's not very good at storing it's at keeping its data secure, but it's very good at geocoding it. So the latitude, longitude of all this data was very beautifully curated. So when it leaked, the WikiLeaks was able to create a visualization instantly, because they just put it into fusion tables and they created this map. This map got 100 million views in 1 weekend after it was published. Okay, that's that's pretty good for a database guy. That's a good pickup line into art. No, I mean, it's like, try that. You should. The same guy Simon Rogers, he's actually an innovator. He's been a user of fusion tables and teaching a lot of other journalists how to use it as well. This is when there were riots in London. I think this was August last year. No, this is 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. So he took on a map. He put where were the incidents, where were the riots, and then what are the poverty rates in different parts of London. And he showed the correlation between, or this correlation, I don't remember, between rioting and poverty. Okay, and this is something that again he put on his this. This is how journalists are adding value to their profession today by actually backing up their stories with data. And so this guy, Simon Rogers, won an award for Best UK Internet Journalist and Knight Batten Award for Innovation in Journalism, which is a big deal if you're a journalist. So this is nice. People are winning. So he said that he got the award mostly because of using fusion tables. So we were happy with that. We sent him a T-shirt. He was happy. What else do you want? Okay, T-shirts go a long way. Anyway, so the point is, we're enabling people in journalism to innovate, which is great. This is not only are we good with we're good, very, very good with disasters. Okay, so this is when the hurricane was approaching New York. I don't remember. I don't think this is Sandy. This is the one before Sandy. So one of the newspapers in New York was actually put up a map of where you should get the heck out of. And so this again, this kind of map gets 100 million views within very, very little time, and it saves people's lives. Okay, let's be honest. This is the Google crisis response in Japan. So this is actually the first crisis we dealt with fusion tables. So there people were absolutely devastated, and this was actually an internal team at Google. But then does anybody here know Japanese? So I can say whatever I want. Okay, so this is either a map of closures of roads or utility shutdowns. But anyway, these maps received a huge amount of visibility for people in need during that time. Okay, and the funny thing about it was not funny, but they created it by Google, the Google Crisis Response Team, and they got a lot of hits. But then when Yahoo Japan put it on their front page, that's when it really got a lot of hits. And that's Japan, okay. But the point is, they didn't mind putting up a Google map, okay. Elections, okay. So this is another use case of fusion table. Again, this is not anything we're doing. This is people out there, our users that are doing this, okay. So I'm just telling you nice stories about what people did with this. In the Iowa caucuses, remember a year ago, maybe you choose to forget, when the primary started. So actually on the first primary, this is Iowa, the Republican Party, they put the data directly that they counted, they put it directly into a fusion table. So as a result of that, the fusion table that was displayed in a bunch of media was actually ahead of AP. The Associated Press, okay, which in the election counting community created a whole disaster. A lot of arguments. It turns out that the Republican Party is not terribly good at counting. So when the AP data finally came in, it was clear that there are challenges there. But anyway, the ability to actually drill down to a particular county in real time and see the data. So this fusion tables was used to publish data in real time, but from elections from all over the national elections, as well as Mexico and Egypt and a bunch of other countries that I don't remember right now. You had a question?
You touched on it here, and I was going to ask you about the water. How do you deal with incomplete or incorrectly formatted reporting in these instances?
We don't deal with it. So since it's
is there a social way to go about that? Is there
That's a good question.
Watchers watching the watchers.
Yeah. So people get that feedback. So in fact, one of the things that Simon Rogers told us is that when he puts up data in one of his stories, that attracts more data. So people come to him and say, "Oh wow, you have this data. I have this other data that can complement or maybe correct or maybe whatever your data. So it's like a data magnet. Can you imagine that, a data being a magnet? So when you put some data out there, other people want to all of a sudden participate and help and enhance the data.
Outside of the social, is there also a way within the data to be able to identify places where there's holes forming?
You could do that with a visualization. So you can look at a map of the world and say, hey, I don't have coffee consumption data for these 3 countries because they're appearing as white. So visualization helps you with that. I mean, within the tool that we have today, that's the best that we offer. We actually had a feature called comments. So we thought, wow, we're going to make data really cool. People can comment on it the same way they comment on Facebook, right? So we had the ability to comment on individual cells, rows, columns in fusion tables, and some people thought it was cool, but we actually turned it off after a while because it wasn't getting enough usage, probably because we didn't implement it in a way that was compelling enough. But yeah, you live and learn. So elections was another place we made a big, well, we're not responsible for the results, but people got information faster. Here's a really interesting one that appeared just a few weeks ago. So after the Sandy Hook massacre, some journalist in New York State went and collected the data for who has a gun permit. Not people who actually bought the guns, but who got a permit for a gun, and put it on a map. Okay, now this was on CNN. This is this raised a huge controversy because do you want that data to be public? I mean, it's public data. It's not that they had to go and they weren't doing anything illegal. This was public data that the Information Act or whatever the act of, there's some word for it. They have the right to get that data and to publish it. Huh?
FOIA, Freedom of Information.
Exactly. So it's not that they were doing something that is illegal. All of a sudden, it was really easy to do this, which is why they did it. But now people are looking at us. I don't know that I want. First of all, if I have a permit, I'm not sure I want my neighbors to know that. If I don't have a permit, I certainly don't want the crooks to know that, right? And so this raises some really interesting ethical question, and apparently these journalists were harassed, and so there was a big controversy about whether this data should be public or not. Until now, the assumption was, yeah, public. There can be public data, but since nobody can see it or do anything with it, who cares? But now people can actually do this. Okay, imagine taking the the gun ownership data and matching it up with some other unemployment or I don't know, or sex offenders, right? That's public data. Wouldn't you want to do that? Kind of scary. Anyway, so this is the kind of issues. These are the kinds of issues that this making data easy is raising. This is the best example of data integration I've ever seen. This went viral shortly after the Japan earthquake. So what somebody did here was they took 2 data sets that were created independently. Okay, the first one is the red stuff, the green and red stuff, is basically all the earthquake activity since 1973. Okay, so red means you got a lot of earthquakes. Okay, you don't want to live there unless you appreciate earthquake existence. Okay. The second data set is the purple or blue dots, depending on your opinion, is where all the nuclear reactors are in the world. So the idea was I wanted to know whether there's a nuclear reactor next to an area that is earthquake prone. This was the question on everybody's mind when the nuclear reactors in Japan were crumbling down. Okay, so this is data integration being put to use. Okay, again, this is just data. But when data is made useful, it's great. Crowdsourcing. So this is somebody who started in Spain and said he crowdsourced all the potholes in Spain. Okay, so you know, if you lived in New Jersey, you know what a pothole is. In California, we don't have them much. But and it spread, you know, to the rest of Europe. It spread to Argentina. So this is great. You know, something tells me that the Spanish government doesn't have a lot of resources right now to go out and survey all these potholes. But if the public can tell it and they can, you know, send their resources appropriately, that would be great. So you're getting the public to do, and they were building this using the Google the Fusion Tables API. Okay, so maybe it's not as useful as bottles of water, but it's potholes, you know. I can't give a talk about Fusion Tables without mentioning public toilets in Australia. Okay, this is a map that I actually created in preparation for a talk that I was giving in Australia. But since then, the Australian government or whoever is in charge of toilets there has replicated this map on their own site. And so I put this up in front of an Australian audience. Okay, which you know, it's an interesting map. You can actually select where are the free toilets, where are the male, female toilets. But people started laughing. Okay, and I didn't understand. I mean, I'm not that funny, but they didn't stop laughing. And after a while, when they didn't stop, I asked my host, you know, like in the middle of the talk, like, what's going on? So it turns out that this visualization confirms all the stereotypes that Australia has about Tasmania. Tasmania is that little that little pile of toilets down there, and they just couldn't contain themselves. Okay, they now know for sure that Tasmania is one big toilet. So the power of visualization. Anyway, so this is what I have to say about Fusion Tables. How are we doing on time? I don't have a. Okay, we're doing okay. Again, I do the talking, but I've got a team of amazing people who do a lot of the work. You might recognize some of them from this list. Bijun was there in you know, before Fusion Tables, or the precursor to Fusion Tables. So give her credit or blame or whatever. Complain to her. Yeah. So without Bijun being there, I wouldn't be here today. So that's the lineage here. Let's see. So let me go through this. So one of the interesting things about a lot of people putting data into Fusion Tables or any other tool is that all of a sudden you have. I wonder if this will actually go back. Yeah. All of a sudden you're now creating a collection of really good data in the cloud. Okay. So now a traditional database application you can imagine that it'll have access to all this other data. So suppose I am a high school student, okay, and I have a project in my science class to look at the number of endangered species of species of birds that are in danger of extinction in different countries in the world. And I go and I find a data set about that. Okay, so I find country, number of species in danger of extinction. Okay. Now, suppose I can just click on a button and say, you know, I want to put this data in the context of the area of the country or the population. Okay, so traditionally, right, you'd have to go and find another data set and figure it out and reformat it and import it in, and you know, that would be a pain. You just wouldn't do it. But imagine you can just type it into a search box, population, and the system would understand, oh, I've got countries here. So you're looking for the population of the country. I've got a good data set that a lot of people like because they tagged it socially, right? And just plop it in. So imagine you could just benefit from the sweat of all these other people when it comes to data. You're not alone anymore. You're leveraging huge amounts of other great data that people have already made public. So we're trying to make that happen. Okay, we're trying to make that. So today in Fusion Tables, so we've worked on this, okay, and there are a bunch of technical problems that need to be solved. But today you can actually take your coffee data and say, you know, I want to join this with population. And no, I said the word join, okay. Again, not a great pickup word in a bar, okay. But people don't think of first of all, they don't like thinking about joins, okay. They don't know what they are. They don't need to know what they are. That's the point. They should be thinking about it as search, as fill in another column here. Okay, so we have an initial version of that in Fusion Tables that you can say, you know, find tables to merge with. You type in the name of an attribute, and it'll do its best, A, to find a table that has that attribute, and B, a table that has the attribute for the entities that you already have in your table. So if you have, you know, Asian countries, it won't give you populations of countries in Europe. It'll actually give you populations of Asian countries. Okay. But again, there's a ton to do there. And one of those is finding good tables. So a few years ago, I started some work with Mike Caffarella, who is now a professor at the University of Michigan. At the time, he was a PhD student at the University of Washington, where I had been before coming to Google. And we look at this table. This is a beautiful table, right? This could come out of a database. It's sitting there on the web. It's not on the deep web. It's on the surface web, okay? And it's got a beautiful schema. You look at it, you know exactly what it is. It's got answers to queries that people ask every day. Okay, like, you know, what party did Zachary Taylor belong to? The answer is here. And the question is, how many tables like this are there on the web? Can we find them? Can we use them? Can we bring them up in search results when people ask questions that are answered by this kind of table? Okay, so the answer is, okay, the answer is that so we did a crawl. So you can look at every web page, and you look at begin table and HTML table and HTML table. Okay, so at the time, I don't remember what the size of the corpus was, and even if I did remember, I'm not supposed to tell you. We found 14 billion tables. 14 billion tables. Okay, there's something really nice about the number 14 billion. So here's the problem. The problem is, out of these 14 billion tables, only less than 1% of these tables are actually tables that are, you would call, beautiful or interesting or have valuable data. Okay, so the nice thing about 14 billion, the number 14 billion, is that even after you throw out 99%, you're still left with a really big number. Okay, and as database people, we had a database, or the number of tables we had was something like 150 million tables. That's about 5 orders of magnitude more tables than any of the most complicated SAP tables. Okay, and we can find enough tables in German to compete with SAP on their German schema too. Okay, so that's not the problem. So the problem was, how do you find, out of a huge corpus like this, how do you find the really, really good tables? And this problem, and it's not just tables, it's also lists. So this is a good list. It's not formatted as a table, but it's a great list, right? It's got something that you could put in a database. Here's the problem. The problem is that most of the tables on the web are, I don't want to call them pure crap. They're just, I just did, but they are, they're formatting. So there's no nice way in HTML to say, put this information in rows and columns. You have to call it a table. Right? Now there is a way in HTML to say this row, this first row is a schema row, it's a header row. I'm telling you that this row is special. Okay? It's somebody thought about this and put this into the HTML standard. Nobody uses it. Okay? So that doesn't help us. So the problem is that to a machine, this table here, which I would call not particularly relational data, putting it nicely, looks exactly the same as the data of the table of the presidents, right? Unless you develop interesting algorithms that, or not interesting, sophisticated algorithms that actually can tease these apart. Okay, so there are also a lot of like about 15% of the tables that you'll find are what we call vertical tables. They're kind of containing data, but they're containing like one row in a database, right? So the left column is the name of the attribute, right? It's like Google, so it's which industry it is, when it was founded, blah blah blah. And then the second column is the value. So if you were to put it in the database, then it would be one row, except you're repeating the header row for each one of these. So these are not interesting by themselves. They're more interesting when you put them together. There's another thing about structured data on the web, which it's really brittle. Okay, so if you look at this table, again, it's a coffee table. Okay, not a coffee table. It's a table about coffee. Okay, sorry. So what you're seeing here is the exports of coffee according, by country. Okay, but first of all, it doesn't say coffee anywhere in the table itself, right? The table itself says 60 kilogram bags, which if you're a coffee nut like me, that's what's used to transport coffee, but maybe it's used for other things. I just don't know about it yet. But it doesn't actually say that it's coffee. So coffee is somewhere in the text, and it may not be very prominent. Okay, it might be talking, there might be other things in the text that could refer to what this table could be about. And furthermore, if you look at the last token here, 2006, right in the top, this token just by itself is already telling you that this data is 7 years old. So one token can completely change the semantics of the entire table. And if you don't understand that this token is key, you're hosed. Okay? So, so the problem is it's very brittle. Unless you identify these very key tokens and exactly understand what their role is, you don't have a chance in hell of understanding what this data is, which means you're going to embarrass yourself in search results. Okay? This doesn't happen in text. In text, you have enough redundancy, you have enough sentence structure and stuff like that that sort of compensates for the brittleness of, you don't have to know exactly the order of the words in order to know that a particular text is talking about a particular topic. Okay? But here you have to know exactly the role of this token in order to know that that's the one that matters. So this makes the problem of finding these good tables hard. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get you guys to weep. Okay, this is a really hard problem. We've been working on this for a while. I just want you to get a flavor for why this is so hard. Here is a table, a beautiful table on all the officials of Gig Harbor. Okay, there's no schema. No schema. How am I supplying? I'm a database guy. Without schema, I'm lost. I'm not lost, but the database system is going to be lost. So, but a person looking at this, which is the intention, knows exactly what's going on, right? A person does not need a schema. Oh, here's another example. This is just plain damn complicated. So these are counts of people that have more than one Asian ethnicity. Chinese who married Vietnamese or Korean. How many of them are there? Okay, you look at this, it's like, how is a machine ever going to understand this? Okay, and you might ask, a machine doesn't have to understand this. It just sort of needs to, understand enough to bring it, in search results when it's relevant. But that's also a good question. So let me tell you one trick, that one thing you should take away from here. Okay, so the most powerful trick we have in order to detect good tables from bad tables is to try to use semantics. Now, a few years ago at Google, you would say semantics, you would be shown to the, to the door, okay, or at least you would be frowned upon, okay, or you'd have to, couch it in some other words that, you want to say semantics, but you don't actually say semantics, okay. So, but what we have here is semantics. So, look at this left column in this table, okay. This is, I don't know what this is. When I looked at this table for the first time, I didn't know what it is. But if you look on the web, okay, then you will find sentences. For example, the one saying other species such as green ash. So if you look at the second value over there, it's green ash. So somebody on the web said that green ash is a species, okay, and somebody else said that it's a North American species. And they didn't just say this about green ash. They said it for, half of the values on this column. It's on the web. So now, if a lot of the values in this column are all discussed as being as species, well, maybe this table is about tree species or North American tree species. Somebody's telling you something, except they're not putting it in one place. So if you find some coherence, semantic coherence between the values of a column and a table, that is an excellent signal that this is actually an interesting table. Why? Because there's some semantics that is common to the rows. Okay, that's by far my most interesting observation about looking at tables on the web, and we're running with this as fast as we can. Today we have the Google Knowledge Graph, which is a set of entities that we can reconcile to. Okay, and we're trying to make sense of these tables in the context of the Google Knowledge Graph as much as possible. So you can also imagine that the knowledge graph gives us some clues about what this table might be, but we pay back by saying, hey, knowledge graph, you know about these entities. This table has these other entities that you don't know about. So all of a sudden we were teaching the knowledge graph about new North American species. Okay, that's kind of interesting. We're using the web to help the knowledge graph and vice versa. So we do have a search engine today that you can find in Fusion Tables, where you can go and you can search either all the tables on the web or all the public tables or the tables that were imported into Fusion Tables and were marked as public, so other people can find them, and then you can import them into Fusion Tables, do whatever you want. So we're trying to, if you remember the ecosystem that we're trying to create here, so we're doing some discovery, we're bringing it in, we're giving you tools to manage the data, to visualize it, to integrate it, and to publish it back. Okay, so we're reaching the end of the first part of the talk. Okay. So again, so it's all about the ecosystem. We're building parts of it. I think we've seen that it's taken some. We have some avid users that actually have the eyeballs that come into their sites, and we're empowering them. Okay. If you want to know more about data integration, so during the time that I was writing a book about coffee, I was also writing a book about data integration, which came out last year from Morgan Kaufman. It's called Principles of Data Integration. How would you want? You want principles, right? It's all about principles. It's got a lot of trains in it. I don't know why. This is what happens when you sign on with a real publisher. They come up with ideas. So they have to, right? Because they're making most of the money. And this is actually written with two of my ex-PhD students, Ann Haidoan and Zach Ives, both students of mine from the University of Washington. Okay, so we're finished with the technical part. Well, the second part will be very technical, but about a very different domain. Anybody have questions about data?
You briefly touched upon privacy. When does the benefits of data integration outweigh and become the privacy concern? Do you have any inputs on this?
I don't claim to have an answer to that. I think it's on a case-by-case basis. So if you actually, I think there's enough data out there. Here's my conjecture. There's enough data out there that if you had a really good data integration tool, most of us are hosed. Okay? So I think people have published data under the assumption that it can never be merged or integrated with other data. Right? I mean, the reason this country exists is because there's no data integration going on in the IRS, right? Because we can do whatever we want and report whatever we want, and then when we go and turn in our 1040s, we do something else. The IRS does not know how to do data integration. Okay, don't tell anybody. But it's it's saving a lot of us thousands of dollars every year. So so I think it's so like in the example of the gun owners, right? This was not even data integration. This was taking a piece of data that was public, or nominally public, and making it visible. And already there was a lot of controversy. So I think this is something that's going to evolve over time. Yeah.
This is something in my own experience. I see a lot. You get tables that are created by people who may not know the domain, and say health, maybe something where they're leaving out a column, a critical column, which makes the entire difference. And so by the time it gets to the display end or to sort of researchers, they're missing the sort of fine sort of slice that makes the entire difference. In like it's not one tumor sample, it's two actually, but it's lumped into one column. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
It's a really hard problem. So especially when we're trying to suggest automatic joins. So when you're saying here's a data set that you can join with, then you need to make a judgment about so yeah, you can see the values in one column on this side and one column on that side are the same values, but does that mean they're joinable? I mean, certainly if they're not joinable, but are you missing context that makes this join make sense? And I think that's a really, really hard problem. We might, I think this is one place we're going to have to rely on social signals. So if a lot of people join with this table, then maybe it does have the context. But ultimately, what you need to do is you need to make it possible for a person to very quickly make a judgment about whether this data or whether this join is relevant to them. So you need to make sure that the lineage or the provenance, whatever you want to call it, if there are any assumptions that are explicit in the data, or they're made to the person about to do the join. But I don't think you're not going to be able to solve this completely automatically, obviously. So, but it's
or the domain. Like I always think, like getting the domain, the circle, and there's more domain expertise back to the people who are the DBAs and the people who are domain experts know.
Right. I think this is something we're just starting to scratch the surface of. It's one of the more exciting aspects of what we're trying to do. I wish I had a great answer. Invite me here in 5 more years, and I'll give you an answer. Okay, you and then you.
Okay, so like you talk a lot about like tables and structured data as a source of data in the web. Do you see also like to get structured data from maybe unstructured source? Is there like a lot of useful data from like non-tables?
There's a ton of data in non-tables, and there's a huge teams at Google who are trying to extract data using a variety of information extraction techniques into structured data. Sometimes they will do it in a very directed fashion. For example, they will say, today we need to know the CEOs of all the companies. So they will have an extractor that goes and identifies, specific patterns and tries to do this. So yeah, I mean, and you could argue about where is there more data? There's unstructured data tends to be more sparse. In other words, you will find, in a paragraph, you might find 3 or 4 interesting, quote, tuples that you would put in a database, whereas in structured data, you'll find them, one next to the other, and if you can invest a little bit more, you'll get, a lot of rows instead of one. So yeah, no, but there's a ton of it.
Kind of staying on the same topic. Imagining that there was some sort of way, like maybe a community way of like Wikipedia to say that this is better value, a little bit worse yet. And so we're able to say that maybe certain tables are more healthy than other tables, right? Is there a way to even bring that to below the table level and start saying this type of data or this specific column is more or less healthy? Is that a viable strategy?
By healthy, you mean accurate?
Good. Yeah.
True to the world?
Yeah, complete.
Complete.
Is it like,
That's tough, though. That's tough because you don't know. It's almost like you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know it. Yeah.
Well, so in general, let me conjecture that when you have a table, the reliability of the columns will probably not differ much from one column to another, because what makes a table, is it's more about the person who actually published the table and how careful they are about that. And typically, again, I'm making this up, typically people don't say, I'm going to give you 3 columns. One of them is the subject column, but the second column is really good, but I'm going to give you this other crappy column because it looks better if I have 3 columns.
Hours of operation versus food quality at restaurants would be an example. Hours of operation are solid, food quality variable, right? Depending upon what the customer felt like that day.
So that's actually, so you should be able to figure that out because food quality is subjective, right? Operating hours is supposedly not. So you can actually imagine looking at different columns and saying, by nature, just by the data type itself, one is more susceptible to being inaccurate, subjective, out of date, right?
So that would be looking at the type of data that's there, not within the variations of that data type. There's no clue within.
So there is actually work in trying to look to corroborate across multiple data sets and see whether you're actually seeing a lot of agreement. The problem with that is, and again, there's work on trying to solve that, is that a lot of data sets are copied from one place to another. So just the number of occurrences of a particular tuple on the web doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. It just means it was easy to copy. But actually it turns out that you can detect copying by looking at errors. So if the error is propagated, then you can see copying relationships, and then you can discount them. But yeah, corroboration. See, the thing is, in order to corroborate data across multiple tables, the first thing you need to do is understand the tables, because they're not going to use the same column headers. So if you don't understand how to reconcile the heterogeneity is when people use different names to mean the same thing in different tables. Why? It's like choosing variable names in a computer program. If you and I came up with 2 programs that had the same variable names, that's the best sign that we copied, right? That's no doubt about it. Same thing with schema. Okay. In fact, when I was a professor at the University of Washington, I would, when I saw the same schema in different places, I knew the students copied. Okay. I didn't have to be that terribly smart for that. So by nature, people use different naming schemes to refer to the same thing. Or different organizations, they might have a different table structure or formatting, or they might, one might have first name, last name in one column, another will separate it. It's just by nature of being individuals, right? And so you can't corroborate across multiple data sources unless you can actually see what is the corresponding tuple here to the corresponding tuple there, which is a really hard problem. I've only been working on it for 15 years. You had a question, and then.
A very similar question. Essentially, like I say, when you try to join two tables, right? I mean, the two tables are separated by different humans. They have slightly different flavor of describing the same thing. I mean, it's a hard problem. Other than like a manually solved problem, what else you can do?
I think you can mine the web for synonyms. You can mine the web for. I'll give you a simple example. You can see that when people are searching for, Barack Obama Vice President and Barack Obama VP, they tend to click on the same search result. Okay, so that gives you a hint that VP and Vice President are synonyms. So you can look at, there's other signals today in the information ecosystem that let you identify synonyms. I'm not saying it's perfect, or I'm not, it's still a hard problem. I'll give you another example. When we had 154 million tables, one of the things that we did was we looked at the schema rows of those tables, and we looked at pairs of attribute names that never occurred in the same table, but always occurred with the same surrounding attribute names. Okay, with the idea that this is just different ways of calling the same thing, and they would be synonyms. Okay, so these are attribute names that are never used together, but always used in the same context. And we actually got some really nice synonyms that would never be, say, in a thesaurus or something like that. But no, it's called the schema heterogeneity problem, and the beauty of being working on data integrations is it's a problem that is guaranteed to last for your entire career. I have a colleague, a famous guy, Phil Bernstein from Microsoft. When he started his career, he worked on transaction processing. And 10 years later, they've kind of solved it. There was nothing hot to do in transaction processing. So he moved into data integration. 10 years later, he said, "Oh, I'm so happy. Now I have, lifelong employment. This is such a hard problem. I'm never going to crack it." And so, so it's on the other hand, it's kind of frustrating. But the 1, 2, and then 3. Yes, go for it.
So you talk about you build on schema matching and schema prediction. What rules do external ontologies play in this?
That's a great question. So let's distinguish. So the Google Knowledge Graph is a very big ontology, and we certainly try to anchor whatever we find in that ontology. Okay. We also find that there's a lot of stuff that is not in that ontology, and we need to extend it. But you can imagine, say, you have some great ontology in the medical domain, right? So my vision, at least, is you should be able to throw it into a pile of ontologies, and we don't need to understand, we don't have to spend time on this individual ontology in order for that to give us evidence. So, for example, if I'm trying to figure out whether, I don't know, some disease is a subclass of another disease, I don't need to understand, the fact that it appears that way in one ontology or a few ontologies, that should be a signal, just like I look at the query log of Google to see, for another signal, that should help me. So my vision is throw in whatever you want. You've got ontologies, give them to me. Okay, I'll put them in one big pile, and I'll have a great learning or mining algorithm that will find the true relationships that hold in the world. So yeah, I see a great role for external ontologies. There was yeah.
So how much of this can be applied to enterprise data?
All of it. Show me an enterprise that is not as messy as the web. So I think, if you go to, sorry, did you finish the question?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned SAP tables, and there could be some other customer tables. Can we apply these principles to connect?
I think so. So what you see in enterprises a lot, first of all, you're starting from a core set of data, and then you've got copies and versions and stuff like that. So you should be able to use some of the techniques here to sort of at least find the lineage between these things, right? You should be able, the schema repetitions, you should be able to leverage those in order to understand what's going on. You should be able to do table search. So even if you don't understand the table, you're looking for some data, you should have a system that says, here, I found 5 databases in your company, and these tables that have data that is relevant. Then you can explore further. So finding a good table in response to, say, keyword query is a technology that would be useful in the enterprise. Furthermore, in the enterprise, you can actually have like a master database or master data set that helps you, anchor mentions that you see in other data. You might actually have more domain expertise to be able to direct the search even better, which is something we don't do because we have too many domains, so we can't do that. Yeah, that was a question. Yeah, sorry, we're going there in a sec. I'm left-handed, so I always go to the right. Yes.
Initially, you mentioned that you found 14 billion tables, out of which 99% was crap.
I didn't say crap. I said crap, but don't remember that. Don't quote me on that.
So I was just wondering, what are the attributes that determine useful data versus non-useful data? One of the things that you mentioned was the ontology graph, but I'd be very surprised if you'd be able to find like most of that stuff in the ontology graph even for the useful stuff. Yeah. So I'm assuming ontology won't be enough to filter out 99%. So then what are the other features that you look at?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, what is a good data set and what isn't is actually subjective. So on my team, we have gone through multiple rounds of annotating, looking at tables and trying to agree amongst ourselves what we think is a good table, what is a bad table. And we're getting closer to understanding this, but it is subjective. There are, to me, the criteria is, would you imagine putting this data in a database, in a spreadsheet, asking a query about it? Okay, if it's purely navigational query, so you have you're trying to navigate to different sites and you just put them in a bunch of rows and columns. To me, that's not you don't actually have any valuable information in there. What tends to happen a lot is a good table is something that has a column that refers to a set of entities and other columns that refer to properties of those entities. Okay, so that would go into a
example that you actually have for example, review. So first set of entities is product ID. So product is actually useful, and then you have subjective reviews, which is crap.
Well, the subjective reviews, you can argue that they're actually useful if you aggregate them with others. So you're right. So the column, it's the leftmost column is interesting because it gives you the enumeration of a set. Okay. Then the question is, are there going to be other data sets out there that will give you enumerations of that same set, but will actually give you some interesting properties of those?
You're just looking for repetition.
Yeah, so I think it boils down to, can you imagine a search query that should bring up this table in response? And you can always imagine a search query, right? I mean, so this is why it is kind of subjective. But what we actually do is we look at which tables come up very high in Google search. So that's another thing. Now, when I said the ontology, that's just a method for trying to see whether the table is useful. So if there's a commonality, if there's a column, so for example, I can find that there's a column of countries, okay? The countries are in the knowledge graph, but I may not have, the rest of the columns will be numbers. I don't understand what they are. There's still a good table, even though I don't understand what those numbers are or what the properties are in the header. But the fact that there is a list of countries with a bunch of numbers next to them, that's a signal to me that that is some interesting property of entities that I know about. Again, that doesn't hold always. I mean, there are tables of people who are not students at a university. They're not all known entities to the knowledge graph, right? That's still useful data, but you need different techniques. You need to say, okay, these all look like names of people. Fine. So this should be, even if it's not in the knowledge graph. It's a hard problem.
Seems to me that pretty much all your visualizations were on maps of some kind. Is there some other base for visualization that's even vaguely as useful as map? I can't think of one. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So maps are by far the most useful visualization that people like. It's very gives you a global picture. It gives you a picture down to your neighborhood. You can empathize with the map. Okay. You can plot a lot of things on maps. Okay. The reason you're seeing a lot of maps is because in the beginning of Fusion Tables, we put a lot of effort into making our maps scalable and quick, fast. Okay. And in fact, we are, as a result of that, the geo section of Google, or the geo part of Google, has looked at us and is actually using some of our technology in their products. There isn't anything that is as popular as maps. The second most popular one would be timelines. People like to look at a timeline of events, of stock purchase, stock prices, stuff like that. After that, there's a very quick trailing off of that people use network graphs to see relationships between objects. They use bar charts, pie charts, stuff like that. But maps, and because we have such great mapping abilities today, that's by far, yeah.
How do you link the table from different languages together?
We don't.
You don't.
Everything we do is in English, though there's nothing.
Even the Japanese data was all in English. You just have.
No. This was put into in Fusion Tables by a bunch of Japanese people. So Fusion Tables supports any language, and so if you have data in Japanese, you can put it in, and that's fine. We're not trying to understand that data.
But when you do searching for a table, it's only in English.
Yeah. If you put a search term in Japanese, we'll find it.
Oh.
I think. I haven't tried. I don't know Japanese. Yeah. Let's. How are we? This last question. Okay.
Two things. One is the comment. The maps. In a map, the geometry is very meaningful information,
yes.
whereas in the timeline, it's somewhat meaningful information. Pie chart, less so and less so. And I guess this is kind of a goofy question to finish it off with. What's your strategy for memes?
For memes?
Pictures with words typed on the pictures.
I have no strategy, but I'm happy to come up with one. Not only have I never thought about it, nobody ever asked me that question. That's very unique. I have no idea.
I can has
Exactly. I can ask
LOL.
Those things, yeah.
Okay. I'm running out of time. Okay, so let's coffee time. Okay. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I started getting interested in coffee. This all started in. So I'm going to tell you about my book. My book is right here, called The Infinite Emotions of Coffee. I'm going to try to tell you why a computer scientist went and wrote a book about coffee culture and some of my interesting observations along the way. Why did I do this? That's not exactly the reason, but it all started in Café del Doge on University Avenue in Palo Alto. I used to go there with my little boy every Sunday morning. He would have his hot chocolate and I would order my cappuccino. And after a while I decided that their cappuccinos have too much milk in them. But this is an Italian cafe and you don't tell Italians how to make a cappuccino, right? You just don't do that. After 6 months, I decided that, think about it, getting stressed every Saturday night. Am I going to have that milky cappuccino again tomorrow morning? One day I went into the store and I said, can you give me a cappuccino with a little bit less milk? You got too much milk in your cappuccino. And they said, why don't you try the macchiatone? Macchiatone is a cappuccino with less milk, except they have a name for it, okay? So this is the macchiatone. It was the perfect drink. It was the perfect combination of milk and espresso. I was very happy. I went that day and I blogged about it. I wanted to share this knowledge with the world. Okay? 2 days later, I forgot about it. 2 weeks after that, I said, that macchiatone, I should find it in other places. So I did a Google search on macchiatone. So what did I find? My own blog. Okay? The world has not known about macchiatone except for what I blogged. Okay, so I said, well, I work for Google, maybe I've got a bunch of friends in search, and so I checked on Bing. On Bing, 6 of the top 10 results somehow referred to me. So clearly, in a world of connectedness, I have surfaced a concept that was very unknown to the world. Okay, so I decided, how can that be? So I started traveling the world just for my job, and I asked for macchiatone in various places, and I got kind of weird reactions when I asked, do you want a macchiato? No. What do you want? What the heck do you want? And sometimes they will let you get behind the bar and just prepare it for yourself. But I was clearly on to some cultural phenomena. Okay, and I realized after a lot of research that a macchiatone, if you go to Venice, okay, so that strip of Italy between Venice and Verona called the Veneto, okay, any cafe you walk into, you say macchiatone, and it's as if you're one of the guys. Okay, they don't ask, they just make the macchiatone. You go down to Napoli, you ask for a macchiatone. I had a colleague of mine do that experiment for me because I wasn't brave enough. And he was told, what's a macchiatone? It's an American drink, get the heck out of here. Okay, so So clearly, this is only unique to that strip of Italy, okay? Except, and cafes that have lineage that they claim to be Venetian, okay? So like Café del Doge here in Palo Alto, they claim to be Venetian, so they have a macchiatone. When I went to my hometown in Israel, it's a little podunk hometown, there's a cafe that, you know, that claims to be Venetian, and they had macchiatone on the menu, okay? So that was impressive. So I realized that there was something interesting about the culture of coffee, that I'm getting very different experiences in different places of the world. So I said, let me investigate this in a little bit more detail. So I made a plan. I have Google Fusion tables, right? So I can do this. So I said, you know, where do I want to go? I didn't share this with my wife at the time because I didn't want to raise too much of an issue. But so I said, you know, I need to go to all these places. Okay, and really investigate why is it that the coffee experience in different places in the world is so different. Okay, so I wasn't terribly interested in you know, the history of coffee, even though I needed to learn that along the way. There are books about the history of coffee that will, you know, reliably put you to sleep any night you're having trouble falling asleep. I wasn't terribly interested in different recipes from different parts of the world. There are recipe books of different coffee drinks. That's not what I wanted. I wanted the culture. Why is it that coffee and culture are so closely intertwined?
Why is the map doesn't have Italy?
My map has Italy. It's in there, and I went to Italy 3 times. Okay, so let me start by saying I went to Italy 3 times. It's still not good enough for some of the Italians that I speak to, because I didn't go to their little village where the coffee is so unique that they, you know, I know nothing about coffee if I didn't go to their village. Okay, that's one. Just by looking at this map, I have also gotten into trouble with a lot of people. Okay, so I owe apologies to the countries of India. Okay, I have very good Indian friends, so I have to say that first. Country of Canada. Sorry, I did not write about Canada. I didn't write about New Zealand. I'm in trouble there. And those are my main, you know, these are the people that have been complaining the most. Okay, I haven't gotten too many other complaints.
Canadians are complaining. Wow.
Yeah, when Canadians are complaining, they don't really complain. They say, you know, maybe have you heard about Vancouver? And you know, so and the truth is, they have very good coffee in Canada, as good as here, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But I just didn't find anything interesting to say about the coffee in Canada. So it's not that I have anything. No, that didn't come out right.
Just add one more to the list there.
Yeah. So there was just not a captivating story that I could anchor a chapter around. Okay. I also didn't write about Santa Cruz, which was a big mistake, even though there's some really good coffee in Santa Cruz. You should all go to Santa Cruz and tell them that I sent you. Okay, go to Verve Coffee Roasters. Like all of you, have a company offsite at Verve and say, this Alon sent you there. So what is this book about? What will it give you when you read it? So first of all, it's got a lot of photos and a lot of data visualizations, because fundamentally I'm a database guy, even though that hasn't taken me anywhere. So it's like a contemporary prism into the coffee world. Okay, so the coffee world is fascinating. It's global. It's, you know, from seed to cup. It's just very, very, very captivating. If we're used to coming from the tech world where everything changes every 5 years, and we think coffee's been around for centuries, they must have figured it out, right? No, coffee today is really different. Very, very different. The coffee industry is very different than what it was 5 or 10 years ago. Okay, and you know, if the reason Twitter is up all the time or so active, it's because a bunch of coffee people are tweeting like crazy. Okay, these people are caffeinated, they're tweeting, and they're you know, they're ahead of us. It's also giving you a guide to the new hotbeds of coffee. So, despite what you think, Italy may not be the most, you know, the place to go. Sorry, Andre, I know you spent time there, to go for coffee. France, I'll talk about France. I will. France, you know, just don't drink coffee there. It's not a country built for coffee. But on the other hand, go to Copenhagen, go to Oslo, go to Stockholm, go to Reykjavik, go to Japan, go to Melbourne, Australia. Those are the places you want to go to. Okay, so the book gives you a guide to contemporary coffeeism. There are a bunch of good stories that are good to share. They're in a lot of them are in the book. They're good for cocktail parties. You go, you say, oh, did you hear about the story about the King of Sweden and coffee? It works. Okay, believe me, I tried all of them in Google events, and I vetted them before I put them into the book. And then the bad news is, if you actually follow any of my advice, your life will become harder and more expensive. Okay, so once you've crossed the chasm and had really good coffee, you can't go back to the regular stuff. Now, once you've had really high-end coffee, well prepared, you can't go to Starbucks anymore. Okay, friends don't let friends go to Starbucks. It's just not that's not that kind of stuff. Okay, so it's be careful when you enter this coffee world. So very quickly, what is interesting about the coffee world today? There is this thing called the third wave coffee. Think of first wave as being the stuff that was packed into cans and sold basically based on the merit of the TV commercial of who's seducing who in order to get into the house and have some coffee. Okay, so it has nothing to do with coffee, mass production. Second wave started with Alfred Peet here in Berkeley, went into Starbucks, the lingo of caramel latte and all that stuff that took over the world. The third wave coffee is people who are incredibly passionate about coffee. They will go to individual farms in different places of the world, tweet from there. They will work with the farmers. They will work with them to improve their growing methods. They will learn from the farmers. They will pay more for the coffee. They will pay a premium to get the good coffees. They will come in. They come here. They will roast it with extreme professionalism, and they will brew it with artistically. Okay, so these are people that are very passionate about the coffee, and once you've had their coffee, you're host. Okay, now there are two competitions that are driving some of this coffee world. One is the World Barista Championship, and the second is the Cup of Excellence. So the World Barista Championship happens every year. This year it will happen in Melbourne. In fact, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Mike Phillips was the first American to win the competition. Anybody want to venture a guess into which country won more World Barista Championships than any other?
Japan.
Australia.
So who said Italy? Not even the top 10, never. Because Italians, they don't have to compete. They know. They are world champions by definition. They don't care what anybody else thinks. Okay?
Costa Rica.
Huh?
America.
No.
Australia. U.S.
Finland.
France.
Getting closer.
Iceland.
Denmark.
Denmark, yes. Cool. Denmark, then Norway, and the UK, actually. So what do they do in these competitions? They have 15 minutes to go through their spiel. They make 4 espressos, 4 cappuccinos, and 4 signature drinks. Most of us take about 20 minutes to make one decent cappuccino at a barista station. These guys make 12 drinks during that time. They're judged for the taste, for the presentation, for the story. They're usually bringing beans from a particular farm. They're trying to accentuate some specific attribute of that bean. They do that in various artistic ways. You can see these videos on the web. They're mesmerizing. Okay. They're judged. So these are the poor people who have to sit there all day and drink the coffee and rate it and fill out the forms. These people have to go through a lot of training in order to get accredited to be World Barista judges. And then there are the technical judges that make sure that you're not wasting any milk or espresso. You're making sure that your espresso machine is clean all the time, even though you're trying to satisfy the 4 sensory judges. So this is very stressful. Okay, and you're supposed to be very eloquent and do it all within 15 minutes and whatever. So these are the competitions going. There's a latte art competition, which is a separate competition, which is feast for the eyes. These things happen usually together. Stuff like this. There are competitions on coffee tasting. So here the idea is the competitor is given 3 cups of coffee. 2 of them are identical, and they need to figure out which one is different. Okay, and they've got 8 sets of 3, and the person to guess the most is the winner. And these are very hard. The winner typically guesses 4 or 5 correctly. Okay, and of course, if there's a tie, then whoever finished first gets the award. Oh, this is me being nice to my peers. So one day I noticed on Facebook that the World Barista Champion from El Salvador is in the Bay Area. So I called him up. I said, hey, come, lunch at Google, free. He said, sure. Not only am I coming, I'm bringing my brother and his brother and whatever. So a bunch of 4 El Salvadorians came to my to my building, and I got him to stand behind the coffee machine and make people cappuccinos for everybody in my building. I was the most popular guy in my building for a while. Very nice guy. He's the first guy from coffee producing nation that won the World Barista Championship. So that the second time happened the year after. So the year before last it was El Salvador. This year it was a friend of mine, actually, Guatemala, a guy who took me through Guatemala. He was number 2 in the world when we were buddies, and this year he won the World Championship. This is my little boy. He's practicing for a championship in a few years. The second competition is on the growing side. So this is where growers of coffee submit samples to a jury. These are all roasted in the same way, and then the jury goes through a process called cupping. Okay, and so first there's a national jury that weeds out a whole bunch of competitors, and then an international jury comes in and spends a whole week discussing cupping these coffees. This is very hard work, and at the end of the day, the end of the week, they give awards. So I somehow managed to schnoozle my way into the international jury of the Cup of Excellence in Brazil. What's interesting about this competition is that the winners, you don't have to look at me, you can look at these guys. The winners of the competition, or people who get a certain score and above, can actually auction their coffees on the internet. Okay, and as a result, they're getting 5 or 6 times more money per pound than you would get on the market. So this is a really good way of getting some of the top growers a pretty nice reward for their efforts. But more importantly, when people look at the winners, they look at what are the winners doing to get these such good coffees, and the best practices start trickling down to all the farms or more farms in these countries. So these are ways that farmers all over the world, or at least in 10 countries right now, are getting better. So this is the process of slurping and smelling, and it's actually a lot of fun. Okay, and then they get in the room and they discuss, they think, they talk about the acidity and the structure of the coffee and what happened after 5 and 7 minutes and whether it lost its structure or not. And it's like, I was there for 3 days, and after 2 days I decided I can bullshit just like any of the other guys. Okay, and I started doing the same, and nobody noticed. So this is the happy guy. Remember, in Brazil there are 350,000 farmers, coffee farmers. So this guy won the award that year for Cup of Excellence. In the process of writing the book, I broke a few records. So until 2009, I paid at most $7 for a cup of coffee. That was broken in 2010 twice. I paid $65 for coffee, but that included the parking ticket. I'm glad to see that both San Francisco and Los Angeles gave me the same respect. And then in Japan, I paid $140. This is because the Japanese barista champion, when she heard that I'm coming to Japan, said, "Oh, why don't you come visit us? We're just outside of Tokyo. Just come and to our cafe." Like, okay, right outside of Tokyo is $140 of a train ride for 2 hours, but then I got a free espresso. Anyway, it was fun. It was one of the best days of my journey. So let me start from the last trip that I did. Okay, so if you're a coffee person, going to Ethiopia is a pilgrimage. Okay, it's a religious experience. Okay, so I waited till the very end of my tours around the world to do the trip to Ethiopia, because I wanted to make sure that it's well arranged. I was, by that time I was a lean, mean travel machine. It was pretty impressive. So I got literally a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend to wait for me at the airport in Addis Ababa, drive me down to the coffee fields in southern Ethiopia. So what you do is you start from Addis, you start driving out, you're stuck behind a ton of trucks. After about an hour and a half, all the trucks take a left turn. They're going to Djibouti, because that's where the port is. So then you say, great, good, we're onto something. So then you continue, you go through the great, the Great Rift Valley. Okay, stuff that you hear about in the stories, but you don't want to get stuck there with a bad truck. So this is like a 3-4 hour drive through through nothingness. Okay, and then you continue. You actually get to an almost reasonable city. At some point, this road continues down towards Kenya. My driver took us into a dirt road heading towards Somalia. Okay, so this is kind of the setting of what's going on. We go on this dirt road for about 20 miles. We get to this village called Aleto Wondo, which is all about coffee production. And you can see that anywhere you go in the world, you can find a Jewish doctor. So this is Shalom Clinic, clearly. But that's not why I went. I went because I wanted to go to the Yirgacheffe. Okay, if you want to be cool, okay, like really cool, you want to walk into a coffee shop and sound really cool, just ask if they have a Yirgacheffe. So Yirgacheffe is a region in southern Ethiopia that produces some of the best, maybe the best coffees in the world. Okay? Just ask for a Yirgacheffe. Okay, I've been drinking Yirgacheffe for a few years before I went there, and for me to go to Yirgacheffe and see the sign saying, welcome to Yirgacheffe, and these people, waving at me as if I just made their day, was a great experience. Okay, and we were driving up, around the Yirgacheffe, and at one point I asked my host to stop, and I climbed up on a hill to take a few pictures, and it turned out that I was going next to the home of some people there, and they were just so happy to see me, and so I decided to be nice, and I took out the equivalent of $3. Okay, I gave it to them for letting me take a picture from their little hill, and they were so happy. I mean, they were just so happy to receive those $3. I came back home to Google, and the next day I was giving the annual bonuses to the people on my team. I gave this one, I gave them all down. I gave them $50,000, and I didn't get anything near the smile that I got for $3 the week before. It was just like such an eye opener. So anyway. So here, if you're a highfalutin barista coffee person, what they do in Ethiopia with the coffee is all wrong. Okay, they don't roast it. They don't roast it the way you're supposed to roast. They don't grind it using a highfalutin grinder. They certainly don't use a high-end espresso machine to make it. But the coffee that they make using their primitive techniques is amazing. Okay, maybe it's because the other food is just on, I don't. But it's the coffee. Every time they have the coffee ceremonies, and they're just fantastic. Okay, the thing that we did here, you're seeing these guys. They're actually chewing chat. Chat is known as the evil sister of coffee. Why? Because as a farmer, you can either grow chat or you can grow coffee. Chat you can actually sell for more money. You can grow 3 times. You can get 3 crops a year, and it's a drug. Okay, so the entire economy of Yemen is down the tubes because people are sitting there and chewing this stuff. So they offer it to you in all kinds of places in the world, and for various reasons, coffee won over chat many years ago because the distribution channels for chat were not as developed at that time. But today they have airplanes full of chat going to Somalia and Eritrea and places like that to get people high. So we rented these guys. Okay, I wanted to take a picture of people chewing this stuff, so that my host said, "Oh, we'll just rent these guys. We'll pay them, $3, and they'll come here and they'll chew this stuff for an hour, and I'm almost done." Okay, I'll skip Sarajevo, even though I think it's cool. Iceland. Go to Iceland. Do me a favor. Go to Iceland. This guy here. He used to be a member of parliament, of the Icelandic parliament, until one day he was replying to an email message saying exactly what he thought about all the leaders of his party, except he didn't realize that he was CCing the entire party. So 2 weeks later, he was an owner of a coffee shop. I had to do a lot of things. I had to sacrifice a lot of my body for this experience. In Cambodia, where the coffee was awful, even worse than France, I got a coffee body massage, coffee body rub. What they do is they take ground coffee and oil. They massage you. Okay, so I was walking around smelling like a tall cappuccino for a couple of days. It was great. I'll do it again if the job requires. This is the AeroPress. How many people here know about the AeroPress? Okay, if you're looking for a very affordable way of making really, really good coffee, check out this thing. I actually had the inventor of the AeroPress come and give a talk today at Google. See, I'm a very popular guy at Google for some of these reasons. The guy lives here in Los Altos. There are world championships in making AeroPress coffee these days. Very interesting device. Some of the good local coffee shops that you may or may not know about are listed here. And How do I get to go to all these places and be friends with all these coffee people? I bring bribes. So every time I go on a trip, I'd go to the Google store, get a bunch of T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, stuff like that. Coffee people love me. They meet in various conferences. They each come with their little Google thing, and they talk about what a wonderful guy I am to know. The thing that distinguishes my book from all other coffee books, you probably can't read this from here, but it's the only coffee book in the world that has a quote on the back from Vint Cerf, the inventor of the internet. Okay, so you can read the quote later, but it talks about the connection between networking and coffee, and if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's it. I'm already way over time, right? So I'm done.